Hello, and welcome back to 100% Real with Ruby. We have back again Jeremiah, and we had an amazing podcast last time talking about how women need to stop the perpetual dieting cycle. And that's pretty much where we are digging deeper into, except we're really going to trigger point some aspects that just don't seem to leave the space that we're kind of like pulling apart to cut the bullshit. Because Jeremiah said in one of his posts, the people who've dieted for years and still don't get the fat loss they want, they can't build that dream body that looks like they lift. They're the ones that won't take time away from dieting. And we mentioned it in the last podcast too, that it is scary. It's scary to actually have this identity shift, this habit shift, which we feel is completely against everything that we want. Like we want to look good. How the hell can you actually get a more toned, tight physique by eating more food? It's like this complexity in our head, but that's the thing. Diet breaks may seem like a step backwards, but it actually allows you to be more consistent in fat loss. And we don't put 100% into every single phase we're meant to be in if all we have in our mind is we just need to keep dieting, and we don't realize that there is an out and this phase isn't something that's permanent. So I'll let Jeremiah take it away and introduce his little spiel into the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as far as diet breaks go, first of all, I should say thank you for having me back. I'm stoked to be here again. As far as diet breaks go, and again, the whole taking it back, the whole topic of that post, which is the people who have been think of, like, you as a listener, think of how many people you know that have just been dieting for years and years and years. Like that, they're that person, you know, that's the chronic dieter. They rarely ever even seem to be making progress, right? It's not just like hey, like, okay, I lost 20 pounds, lost another 20 pounds, and we're just getting that right. It's almost always these people that are these perpetual dieters where their body is stuck in one place. Now, again, that's when we take it back to nutrition periodization. That's just such a big piece of why these ideas of diet breaks, of maintenance phases, of reverse diets, building phases are so important. And I mean, even past a physiological level, I think most important from like diet breaks specifically from a psychological level, right? So many people get to this point where they're constantly, I'm dieting, and it's like 5, 6, maybe even 5, 6 days a week. I'm very on point. I'm very consistent with my diet. Then there's 1 to 2 days a week where I'm so burnt out on dieting that I just fall off the rails entirely. Right. And then that sets me back. That's enough to, again, those 1 to 2 days are enough to set me back for an entire week. So basically I'm spending 85% of my week always, quote unquote, feeling like I'm dieting, but I've never actually seen the results of the diet. Right. And that's really the primary power of a diet break, is we know that it's going to reduce hunger. It increases your feelings of well-being. It improves mood. But also, like, after a couple of weeks of diet break, like in this specific context, you're going to be mentally rejuvenated and ready to get back to dieting. So that's really kind of the behind that post is really where that was coming from. People see it as like, well, I can't stop dieting, but it's really, hey, this is probably the thing that you need to do in order to actually get to where you want to be. But people see it as like, well, what? It's 2 weeks away from dieting, or a maintenance phase is like a month or a couple months away from dieting. It's like, okay, let's look at this long term. Like, if you're looking at it in just the short term, yes, it is 2 weeks to a couple months where you're not making progress. But let's look at this in the big picture of 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road from now. Either A, you can keep doing what you've been doing and keep spinning your wheels, or we can take a couple of weeks away from dieting. When you get back to the diet, you're going to be more adherent. You're going to see quicker progress again. And in 3 to 6 months from now, like, rather than being stuck in the same place, you can be in a much better place physically. You could be a lot closer where you want to be.
You touched exactly on the thing that people need to realize, and that's, how long have you been doing this for? Like, have you seen the results that you want? You think that this is going to set you back like 8 weeks, however long we need to restore your metabolic capacity and actually build it up to get you into a place to diet again. Mm-hmm. But you've been doing this for years, you've been doing this for however long it is. What is the difference? Like, you can stay stuck for another however many years. You can stay focused on fat loss and be so obsessed with your body, be over obsessed with foods, worried about this, worried about that, not able to actually have it fit into a flexible lifestyle and have balance in your lifestyle. Or you can take that step forward to take those steps towards where you want to be. And you mentioned the psychological benefits, and that's the thing, like, even though we may not feel the physical urge of hunger, there is also the psychological urge to eat, because if you're going to keep pushing and pushing, I actually have a client who is the perfect example. I wasn't going to talk about anyone, but this will be perfect. She always was struggling with hunger. She came to me without hunger. And every single time I checked her macros, she was literally eating like 1,100 calories one day, 800 one day, 1,500 one day, but they're all still really low calories. And would always say she's not hungry, she's not hungry. And then as soon as she starts to get consistent with the higher macros, like forcing them in, she'll start to say, oh, I started to feel hungry. And then now that I had a come to Jesus talk with her, and she finally started just forcing herself to eat the macros that I gave her. And she's like, I'm actually feeling hungry now. And it's a consistent hunger. I'm like, keep doing what you're doing. Do not stop this. And that, like, all of these things that are down regulating is what people don't realize is holding them back. And maybe there's another aspect where they could be overeating, they could be binging, but is it possible for them to actually forget this stuff? Is it possible for them to actually log it down as, no, I'm actually being consistent, but not actually remember the fact that they just had snacks and binges and things out there? Is that something that they even do?
Yeah. So you're asking, is it possible that they were like tracking it accurately? Is that correct?
Tracking accurately, but because they 100% believe that, but because they are so riveted on this dieting, they forget the times when they fell off. So they still believe that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's, again, like, it's a lot of dieting is being in the diet mindset. I think truly that's like one of the most draining parts of it, is like mentally you can feel so defeated, even if it's, and I mean, it's nothing that's like, none of this is to like blame anyone, right? A lot of it is just part of how, this is how most people have been taught to diet. This is how most people saw their parents dieting. It's not like, if this resonates with you, it's not your fault, but it is. Go ahead.
Parents, I was going to say, touch on the parents, because I never realized until I had a few phone calls over the last 3 weeks just how embedded our behaviors are in how we witnessed our parents dieting, how we witnessed our parents stepping on the scales, their behaviors around food. Like, there are some that would just push you to eat because I'm a wog, so I'm going to refer to it as wogs. The wog lifestyle of just finish your plate, just like eat all this food. Aren't you eating? Like, they completely question you. But at the same time, they'd be trying every single diet under the sun because they need to drop their weight. And then, right. Yeah.
Oh no, it is. And I mean, it's by no means something that I'm an expert in, but it is insane how much we pick up our parents' eating habits and how our parents view food and all these things. It's super cool to me because I'll talk to a lot of women who start coaching who, like, one of their main drivers is, I don't want my daughter to like see me talk about food in my body the same way that my mom did, because I know the impact that had on me. I also think, at least from my anecdotal experience, I think it's something that people are becoming a lot more aware of. But again, it is crazy to see like how it is passed down from generation to generation. Like, I know my dad, like, his approach to exercise and food and how he goes about trying to diet. And he absolutely refuses to take my advice on anything, but like how he goes about that is exactly how my grandma did. And like, it's the exact same relationship that we always saw. And it's super interesting to like, and I know with clients as well, you can often like dig into this a little bit more, like, hey, why do you feel this way? Do you ever like see this? Did your parents like talk about themselves the same way? And again, I think that's very much something like, as a parent, this is kind of a different tangent, but I do think it's super important to be aware of like how you're talking about yourself, your relationship with food, and again, like how your children might perceive that. That is different. That's a completely different conversation. But again, I think it's important to be aware of as well, as someone that's not a parent outside of to a dog.
So it is a very important piece of the puzzle. And I'll talk about it a little bit more before I actually link it into what I want to go into next. And that's the thing is, like whether you're a parent or not, it's this trap you keep yourself in of always dieting for like needing to cut these foods out. And the way that you approach food, it's like your kids don't have to eat any different either. But when you allow them to eat different, but you're being so meticulous about your own food, they see that. But then if you're so restrictive with your own food that you then binge on their food, and then all of a sudden you're this moody bitch because you just fell off your plan, you just cheated, you're going to take that out on them because you're unhappy with your situation. And I see that a lot where there are women that actually take out their mood on their kids, or they take it out on their work, or they take it out in everything. Right. And this psychological aspect that comes with dieting isn't something that you want to see yourself doing in 5 years' time, which is right. Why you need to bring in this maintenance phase. Because most people that don't have that body they want, despite consistently working hard in the gym, a lot of people say, oh, I train really hard, my training's really good. Some people do 2 a day, some people do freaking CrossFit, some people just add way too much in it because they think that training hard is the way to go. Like, right. Just because that you have your training nailed to a T, so you think, because nothing I just said then is actually training the way that you should train. So don't think that that's hard training. That's stupid, dumbass clownery shit. Anyway, you need to actually focus on what am I going to do to build muscle, because trying to diet and build muscle at the same time, or training focused on burning calories, is the best way to not look like you lift. And that all comes from this mindset of I need to diet. But if you focus on, I need to build this body, I need to fuel fat loss, because fat loss and weight loss are different. If you're actually going to fuel the fat loss, you're going to actually shape up this body that you want. So maybe you can touch more into this training paradigm and what we should actually be focusing on, because we both have been putting up posts lately on how we are holding ourselves back from our mindset around training.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, when we're talking about, okay, achieving the physique you want, for most people, most people that have been dieting and actually dieting successfully to the point where, okay, most people probably consider you very lean. People probably say stuff to you all the time like, oh my gosh, you're so skinny. Why do you need to diet? But you're stuck in this, well, I still don't look the way I want to. I want to look more toned. I want to look more defined. Typically then the missing piece is, hey, you actually just don't have enough muscle in your frame yet. Right. So most people who start coaching with us come from this place where, okay, my first year where I really got, let's say this was 2 years ago, typically, I got into training hard and I started to somewhat pay attention to my nutrition. My body changed like crazy. I built a good amount of muscle. I lost fat. Now for the last year, since then, my results slowed way down. I've been continuing to try to build muscle and lose fat at the same time, and it's just not working, right? Which is very much like we only have a body recomposition like that where we're losing fat, building muscle at the same time. We have a very limited window to where we can actually achieve this, right? And after a period of time, you're just not going to be able to accomplish that anymore. Now, most people don't accrue the amount of muscle tissue that they want in that time to actually look the way that they want. So the thing here is, like, when we're dieting, it's going to be harder to build muscle mass, right? Rate of muscle protein synthesis is going to be suppressed. We're going to have less fuel to train. Calories are one of our body's primary recovery resources. So we're not going to be able to push as hard. We're not going to be able to recover as well. For a plethora of reasons, it's just going to be a lot harder for us to add muscle tissue. So many people are stuck in this place where, but I'm also afraid to see the scale go up, right? Like, that's a scary thought. I'm afraid of getting fluffier. So I'm again, like, still stuck in this place where I'm trying to build muscle, lose fat at the same time, right? And again, most people have been stuck here for like about a year when we start working with them. So first and foremost, I would say, like, clients in this scenario will typically, like, from a nutritionist perspective, will push into a building phase where we're going to focus on eating a little bit more food, eating in a slight surplus, making sure we're giving your body all the fuel it needs for training hard, all the calories you need to be able to recover, to bring hormones back up to a healthy place, which is another big part, something that can take a big hit if we're dieting for a very long period of time. And again, just make it easier for your body to accrue muscle tissue. But again, most people will come into this with like, well, I kind of just want to continue to try to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. And it's similar to like the point you made earlier. It's, we have to ask, okay, so how well has that been working for you for the last year, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you pay me or not. If we keep doing the same thing, you'll keep getting the same results. So like, I think that's a very important thing to understand. Then when we're actually getting into, did you want to keep this more centered around nutrition, or did you want to get into like the actual components of hypertrophy training? I'm not sure how deep you want to go in that direction.
Probably the most basics, because the most basic people, like the most basic words would resonate with my audience, but the nutrition component especially, because like if we're going to keep focusing on just burning calories at the gym without focusing on the basics of just building muscle, but the main thing that we're gonna touch on is training hard but not actually tracking the nutrition properly. Like, of course lifting weights is going to make you look bulky if your nutrition is a train wreck. Like, you need to make sure both components are moving together.
Absolutely. Yeah, they for sure need to be working synergistically. And I mean, again, then when we're talking about this concept of the building phase and what we do nutritionally here, typically we are trying to see a rate of gain. Now, the rate of gain that people typically prescribe here varies. For us, we typically look for people to gain, and this is going to be very client dependent, right? So if I'm seeing someone's training performance, I'm seeing their logbook continually progress, we're continuing to see improvements of progress pictures, but they're not gaining at the desired rate. Typically, I'm okay with like, hey, we're a little bit behind this. But the point of this is, if we're in this place where we're not in a calorie deficit, so you're not eating fewer calories than you're burning, so thus you shouldn't be losing fat during this time. We're not recomping. If we're not slowly seeing the scale increase, the reality is you're probably just not adding a lot of muscle tissue, right? Because muscle tissue is going to add some weight to your frame. Now, this isn't at all to say like you need to go on a dreamer bulk. You need to try to like gain 30 to 40 pounds. As fun as that is during the time. But again, we should probably be seeing a slow rate of gain, which is kind of the biggest mindfuck for most people. But the thing to understand here is, again, building muscle is a very slow process. Fat loss is a very quick process. So if you gain 1 to 2 pounds of muscle in a month, you're crushing it, right? That's great progress. But we need to realize that if you can very easily lose 1 to 1.5 pounds of fat in a week, right? Most people can pretty easily. Go ahead.
This is exactly the part that I want to drive home with everyone listening to this. Like, a lot of people that come to me already have a lot of fat mass we need to lose. So it's why I say, let's just fuck off the scale. Because when you're new to training, you are going to be building muscle. And Jeremiah said, like, you are going to probably see some fluctuations, see some increases. But the thing is, that is a slow process. But with your training, there also comes the fact that you're going to be holding more water, more carbs in the muscles. Like, there are different components to this scale weight because you're actually training to build the body that you want. But then he also mentioned you will also be losing fat mass only if you are tracking your nutrition properly. So maybe you can actually go into the mistakes that we can make with our nutrition when it comes to this whole process. Because if you're training hard without actually tracking your nutrition, that's just like, cool, we're just pressing the gas pedal, but the car ain't moving anywhere.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the last podcast I used the analogy of kind of your training is the gas pedal, your nutrition is the fuel in the tank, right? No matter what, if you don't have enough fuel or the right kind, it doesn't matter how hard you push the pedal, you're probably still not going to go anywhere. So the biggest mistakes with the nutrition, first and foremost, as you said, would just be not tracking your nutrition, right? And that is very common. Now, I posted about this recently and I actually got a little bit of pushback from it, which I get, but it's also hard for me to understand why someone, and it's each their own, but for me and for the people that I work with, I understand that everyone wants to make like the best possible progress, right? So very much like if you're training hard, but you're not paying attention to what you're doing with your nutrition, if you're not tracking your food intake, and some people can do this if you've like spent years tracking, but that's obviously not who we're speaking to. If you're not paying attention to the food that's coming in, you're literally just leaving so much on the table, right? That's like, oh man, that's like driving, but never like looking at your that never checking your oil, never putting gas in the tank, anything like that, right? Like it's very much, we're leaving such a big piece of this on the table if we're not tracking our nutrition first and foremost. Now, within that, next most common mistake would be, a lot of times people will start coaching and then they'll say, hey, I have these macro targets. These are my macros, and I don't know why I'm progressing. So all right, so as I was saying, a lot of times people will start coaching and they're in this place where like they'll say, hey, I have these macro targets and I don't know why I'm not making progress. These are my macros. So I'll hop into food logs, and typically what I'll see is, well, yes, these are the macro targets you have set. We haven't been hitting these consistently at all, right? And I think even that is like a big mindset shift is, okay, it doesn't matter what targets we have in your tracker in MyFitnessPal. It doesn't matter what training program I give you. Actually doing the thing is what matters, right? And that's a really, as simple as that sounds, that's a very overlooked point to progressing your physique. Really, it's not that complicated. But I also think a lot of people get stuck in this place where it's like, hey, I consistently miss a training session or two a week. My macros, if we actually look at it, maybe you hit 2 to 3 days per week. And the other days are like, within a couple hundred calories, maybe. So kind of close, right? And I posted about this the other day as well, like just close enough to like say it's pretty close, but not close enough to actually make progress. So people kind of can also easily get stuck in this place where it's, I'm not getting results. Why not? Like I have these macros, I have this program, but it's the consistency with these things still just isn't there. And I think before we get too complex, that first and foremost is important to understand. If you're not seeing results, I think that's very important to audit yourself on. Now, from there within nutrition, then of course, getting adequate protein, as we talked about protein a ton on our last episode, which I would definitely refer the listener to here. That is going to be so damn important. It's going to have the highest thermic effect of food. It's very unlikely that protein is going to be stored as fat if we're not getting adequate protein or the nitrogen specifically that's within protein and all the amino acids that come along with protein. We're really going to struggle to build muscle. Protein is going to be very filling, so it's also going to make it, for a plethora of reasons, it's going to make your life easier if you're trying to get leaner and or build muscle. And then from there, I would say anecdotally, something that I see a lot is people really, really focusing on eating a lot of healthy fats, which is definitely not, fats definitely aren't bad. Healthy fats that's good, perfectly fine to eat plenty of fat. But the thing here is, a lot of times people will almost look at it as, at least I've found, people almost look at it as, okay, these calories from these healthy fats like olive oil, avocado, those like don't count when they still absolutely count. And a lot of times people are in this place where, hey, I'm consuming a lot of fat, but my protein and my carbohydrates are very low. And I mean, if we look at the process of like protein, and again, none of this is like the demonized fat, and this is somewhat splitting hairs, but if we look at the process of like protein, if we look at protein being stored as fat or carbs being stored as fat versus fat being stored as fat, it is a lot less likely the protein or carbs are being stored as fat versus fat. Whereas like when we look at the process of building muscle tissue, those protein and the carbs are probably going to be a lot more beneficial versus the fat. So I would say the shift we often make is, hey, let's focus on, and this varies by the individual, but for most people, the focuses here are going to be, hey, let's bring up protein, let's bring carbs up, and let's try to bring that fat intake down a bit.
Yeah, I actually love this path you're going down. I think this is what I really want to ride home with this podcast, because like there is so much out there saying, let's just have a lower carb approach and keep the fats higher. But it's like, yeah, but the thing is, I made a post on this. If you're trying to be healthy by having clean cheese or vegan cheese or this bloody organic, it's from the gods cheese, by blending a whole heap of olive oil and cashews together because it's raw organic and it's dairy-free, paleo, from the ancestors. It's like you're having double the calories, quite literally, because cheese is like dairy. And if you get fat-free cheese, it's literally dairy and carbs. That's 4 calories per gram compared to 9 calories per gram of the cashews and the olive oil. And olive oil has no bloody bulk to it. So you can just have that as liquid calories that don't really count, in my opinion. Like, people don't realize how much extra slathering some butter on does. Slathering some, you can't really slather oil, but you get the point, how much that adds in. And the more that you focus on actually putting the carbs in, because it's not just about what you do in the training. People think that you need to earn your food by training. It's like, you're a busy mom. You run around in the day. You should be getting your steps up regardless, because walking is the most beneficial thing you can do. Like, you mention this all the time, and I used to talk about it all the time. It's the difference in between someone that has a fast metabolism and someone that has a slow metabolism is the fact that they actually walk and they're active outside of the gym. Like, people don't realize the importance of just being active, and they think that because they smash themselves in the gym, they're active. And when I was smashing myself in the gym, I was more stagnant in my progress, and I actually looked like shit. But I was training for powerlifting. I was smashing myself in the gym there. Like, I felt like I was doing a lot because I was in the gym for freaking like 2.5 hours. Not really. I was in the gym for almost 2 hours every single session. I felt like death. I'd add on like 20 minutes of walking, 30 minutes of walking after that. But I was sitting on my ass the rest of the day. And my body looked like shit. It literally, it was the most, there was 1 year where it was the most like conscious I was of my body, because I was stressed out. I was overtraining. I was under eating to make weight. And my body just looked not really skinny fat. It just was smaller, but worse, until it wasn't smaller anymore. But that's the point. Like, if you're just going to keep adding these stresses in without realizing that your food is important as well, which there's 2 different tangents we can go down here. It's the one we started on, where if you're just training, focusing on burning calories and smashing yourself in the gym, but you're not actually resting, recovering, and focusing on the lifestyle factors, that's that story that we can ride home. But then there's these other factors where, yeah, okay, cool, you're sticking to your macros 5 days of the week, but what the hell are you doing on the weekend? Like, there are some people that literally, it doesn't cross their mind. For some reason, it doesn't cross their mind that if they're not following some type of plan on the weekend, it's ruining their progress. Like, you don't need to have the same plan. You can look at your foods. If you have a meal plan, you can look at your meal plan and be like, okay, let's play around with something so we can have something different for the weekend. And if you have macros, you can have 2 different plans, one for the week, one for the weekend. Like, there are 2 different ways that you are stuffing yourself up in terms of actually looking like the dream body you want to look.
Oh, absolutely. Understanding how much of a piece of it weekend is as well is very important. And again, like, taking it back to kind of the theme of the Bair podcast, just understanding it doesn't really matter how hard you're smashing yourself in the gym. Like, what you're doing outside of the gym is just as important for progressing. What you're eating is very important. It's also interesting, a couple of things to touch on there. One, it's definitely interesting to have the conversation about like fat-free or low-fat versus full-fat foods, and how, I know I had a conversation with a client recently that was, hey, like, one of the easy things that we could do here is we could swap this dairy for a lower fat version so you could save more calories, or like you could hit your calorie targets. And it was interesting she said, oh, that makes sense, but I always thought that was less healthy. And it's interesting to look at like I get it, because a lot of people like, that's definitely something that's been put out there. But again, it's like, hey, we're talking about like, your goal is to lose nearly 100 pounds, right? Like, the best thing we can do for your health right now is the best thing we can do to improve your health markers is push along with weight loss. And that's going to come from, first and foremost, just controlling the calories. So it is interesting how much, and I mean, we could probably have the same conversation around like artificial sweeteners, right? Like, I know I had the same conversation with clients who are drinking a lot of soda, and we'll say, hey, like, can we just simply swap this for diet soda? And again, it's always like, well, I thought that was like worse for you than poison is what I had heard. So no, I'm not going to drink that. And it's interesting truly how much marketing and propaganda has kind of tainted the way people, or incorrectly like caused people to view that. That's kind of just a random tangent though.
No, that is actually really freaking important, because I completely, like, that slid past my mind, but people do that all the time. They worry about these lower fat varieties, but it's like, you do realize that the full sugar Coke is actually more unhealthy than the unprocessed one, for the fact that those are refined sugars. They're sugars that can disrupt your gut lining. And if you're going to have that in excess, that's sending such a sweet signal to your brain that, hey, this is actually a good thing because dopamine, sugar, but it's like people are fast to demonize sugar, which is why I hate touching on that tangent, because there's nothing wrong inherently with sugar. It's just if you're having a lot of refined sugar and if it takes up the bulk of your diet and that's literally your source of carbs and you're not having the fibers, the nutrients and all that, then yeah, that's a pretty shit diet. But you can't look at one food in isolation. And if it's the soda or whatever it is that is contributing to you going overboard or whatever happens after that, because I actually find it's never really the food itself. It's what happens after that. And if you make one bad decision, bad in quotation marks, you make one bad decision, it's like you're in this mindset of whatever. But I want to come back to that movement thing. It's like the people that are most active, the people that are very weary of the steps that they take and the movement they do throughout the day and just focusing on, I need to move my body, I need to eat healthy, I need to eat for my goals, like thinking with your goals in mind, those people are generally the ones that actually live a leaner life. They're the ones that do it with less effort. They're the ones that don't even put in much sweat, blood, and tears into it because they've made it this lifestyle. And it's this mindset around, okay, why don't we just keep grabbing the low-fat options or the non-fat options? Why don't we I'm not going to even touch on lower carbs because the lower carb options usually have more fat. So they're usually higher in friggin' calories. So you need to be careful of the marketing propaganda and fill most of your food with these wholesome foods. Go for the lower fat options. Go for the things that make your nutrition easier, because the whole topic of this podcast was pretty much this thing. Like, you can smash yourself in the gym. You can focus on burning calories. You can have the approach of let's just diet without realizing, no, you need to do both things the smart way. You need to stop focusing on dieting and focus on actually having a holistic nutrition kind of view, and not holistic as in with the H. That makes it sound like some rituary craft, but the one with the W that is like looking at it as a whole. I hate saying that word. I hate saying that word for that reason.
Glad you clarify that.
I'm not this Yoda, whatever, but that's the thing. Like, all these little mistakes add up. And
right.
Bringing it back to your client, Kathy, which I loved seeing her progress, she didn't look great after her first fat loss phase. She didn't look that great. Yeah, she lost weight, but she didn't really look like someone that you'd want to look like and someone that you'd aspire to. But that's the thing. You can't just keep pushing her down a diet phase, because what would have happened if you kept pushing her down that diet phase? Like, I'll let you talk about that as well. But he had to stop her going down there, because otherwise she would pretty much be eating close to nothing, training her ass off, just adding more, eating less, and her body would just stop. And then it'll probably rebound without really doing much, because that's not a very good place to be mentally, especially because of the fact we have lives. But now she's been through a few cycles, however many she's been through, because I saw her after her first diet phase compared to the one after her most recent for a photo shoot. She looks like a completely different person. And you need to go through these dieting phases and these resets that don't just happen in a matter of like 2 months or 4 months. Like, you need to get into the diet depending on where you are. Like, I have people that I can push for 16 weeks because they have so much body fat and they're still seeing results. Like, I have someone that has been doing it for about 16 weeks at the moment, and her body's still leaning up, but she's got 2 more weeks left of it because she decided, no, lockdowns end for us in 2 weeks, so let's do it then. So I'm like, yes, perfect. She'll still see results there, and then I can bring her out and she's happy to actually sit reversing up for a good few months. And that's the beauty, because then when she goes back into it, just like Kathy did, you're going to look completely different because your body is going to start processing things different. So maybe you can also talk about that processing part. Like, why is it so important to do that phase after the diet to actually get your body using its nutrients better, partitioning its nutrients better, doing everything better in its metabolic engine to then get an end result the second time that's so much better, and then it just keeps getting better every single time you do it, to the point where you can just live at maintenance and just be in this body recomping life where you're looking better every time.
Yeah. So with Kathy specifically, so there's a picture that I've shared with her at the same weight, where they look, one's after her first fat loss phase, one's after the most recent photo shoot that we got her ready for. Same weight, but her physique looks completely different. She clearly has more muscle and she's clearly leaner in the most recent picture. So the thing to understand there is that's not just like something she did. And this is very important. It's not like we just like took her through a 2-week diet break or a month-long building phase and that was it, right? The thing to understand with that is those pictures are probably 12 to 15 months apart, where she spent almost an entire year after her first photo shoot. She knew that, okay, I want to add more muscle mass. I like the result I got here, but I want to improve on it. Next time I want to be leaner and I want to add more muscle tissue. So we spent the better part of a year focusing on feeding her more food and building. And that's the thing as well. Again, like if we talk about, as I mentioned earlier, if you're building 1 to 2 pounds of muscle in a month, you are absolutely crushing it. And I will say, like, very few people are going to build 2 pounds of muscle a month for a year past the beginner stage. Like, you're not going to add another 24 pounds of muscle every year, right? But and that's important to understand as well. But again, like, it just takes time. I know I had someone, I made a post about the building phase the other day, and I had someone ask me like, hey, is it okay if my building phase is just 3 months? And I said, I mean, in my opinion, it depends on the person, but in my opinion, like, even 3 months is a good way to give yourself a participation trophy for like, hey, I did a building phase without actually getting the result for it. Just like, oof, okay. But that's the reality of it. Again, for most people, it's also understanding that, yes, if you want to do that, it's going to take even like 6 months is a pretty short period of time. For most people, like, we're going to go through a phase where you're going to accrue significant muscle mass. Again, like, especially if you're someone who is like, yeah, Kathy, who had been training for the last 20 some years, like, it's just going to take time to add enough muscle to significantly change your physique. So I kind of actually forgot the original question. But I think that's important to understand. If you could bring me back to what that was.
I actually love these tangents that we go on because you built it up nicely. Like, it wasn't just a freaking one night affair. It wasn't a holiday in where's somewhere that's notorious for affairs. It wasn't somewhere in Thailand where you just slept like for a whole week with some dream guy or dream guy. Like, it's a marriage you're making with yourself for life because you want this body for life, because you ain't gonna keep that guy for a whole, like, that guy isn't interested in commitment. You're going into it with an approach for just an end result. It's just the end result you're after, but you're not actually after the commitment. So if you're not committing yourself to it, what happens next?
That's such a big piece of it as well. I think that all this is so tied into just conversations I've had with clients this week. Even like, I know I was talking to another client about the idea that, like, you can't just cram for this, right? Like, we imagine like you're taking a course and you have a big test coming up. I think sometimes people see it as like, well, I studied really hard for a week, right? Or like, I nailed my macros and I nailed my training for a week. It's like, that's good. But literally, like, your results take you being very, very consistent on point with this for weeks and weeks and months on end. And that's where they lie. And I think that's, again, just like from an expectations perspective, that's such an important piece to understand as well. Like, we can't, especially when it comes to building muscle, we can't just like cram and like, okay, I crushed it for a week. Where are the results at, right? It's very much the culmination of months and months and months.
I actually really liked where you were going on that, because it's like we expect that we can just put on a whole heap of muscle. Like, I have clients sometimes saying, oh, I put on this weight. I'm like, I really don't want to say it wasn't muscle, because that could crush you, but it doesn't work that fast, especially when you're like 45, 50 years old. Like, you don't put on muscle that fast, love. Like, it's why I hate this scales thing. And I was going to mention it before, because you mentioned you put these two photos together, she was the same weight. And this is why I say fuck the scales. I'm going to keep saying fuck the scales on here, because it brings it back to the start of the conversation where he probably scared all of you girls where he said, yeah, you're going to put on weight by training. Like, that's scary, which is why I really wanted to put context to that. And it, like, yeah, maybe the scale might go up, maybe it might go down, maybe it might go up and down, then up and down again. Maybe it just freaking side to side. Who knows? But the thing is, the scale is a sucky thing to go by when you're actually trying to build a dream body. You need to stop thinking of shrinking your body unless you want a smaller body that looks worse, because you're trying so hard, you're pushing yourself so hard, you're in this restrictive dieting mindset continuously. Just listen to my last solo episode that I did right before this one, which literally only goes for like 6-8 minutes. But listen to the podcast before this where I talked about exactly why calories in, calories out doesn't work at the surface level, because it does, but just not the way that you think if you are a chronic dieter. Like, listen to that episode, because when you're in this restrictive dieting mindset, you're pushing and pushing, you're putting all this effort there, but your approach is clownish. Like, you need a smarter approach. And this is why I hate the progress photos people put up there, which is going to link into what you want to talk about next. But the progress photos people put out there, the comparisons game, because we want that now. We're not patient enough to play the long game. Like, my clients that have the best results have been ones that have been with me for over 2 years, because they've been through the process and they're constantly refining their body. I don't put them through massive fat loss phases and bulking phases. They're mainly sitting within maintenance, but they shuffle up and down within that. Their lifestyle demands when they shuffle in and up around that. Like, you need to have this periodized approach. And if you're just going into it with a participation trophy mindset, you're setting yourself up for probably you won't even get a trophy. You might just get a badge.
No, absolutely. I think that this is a hard conversation, because I think that every coach, and I'm definitely guilty of this as well, I want to get people results as quickly as I possibly can. Like, no lie, that helps me. That helps our business. Our clients are happy. Great. But it is also very important to look at, okay, what's in your best interest long term, right? Like, not just what can I do to get the best progress picture from you, but what can I do to where even when we don't work together anymore, if we don't work together in the future, you are still like maintaining these results. I think from a coaching perspective, that's very important. And also, again, like as you said, when it comes to fat loss, people are capable of achieving pretty dramatic results quickly. But when it comes to, hey, I want to completely reshape the way my body looks, right? So we know you want to add, like, someone could lose 30 pounds in 6 months. And if they already had a lot of muscle mass, like a good example of this is like the first photo shoot I got ready for. I already had a lot of muscle. I just hadn't paid attention to my nutrition. So like over the course of 6 months, I had this crazy transformation, but I had already spent years and years and years obsessed with training and training in a smart manner. I was just kind of chunky, right? So that was the biggest difference maker. But again, like, if you're in this place where I want to add muscle mass and I want to lose fat and I want to completely reshape my body, that is going to take time. It's going to take more than a year. Like, I think that is also very important to put out there. From like a marketing perspective and a sales perspective, it's not the sexiest hook by any means. But also I think that expectation and like understanding that as a client is so important. I don't know if like the 30-day quick fixes and things of that nature are as popular as they used to be, or I don't know if I'm just isolated from that. I feel like I'm kind of like in my own little bubble. I follow like people like you. I think I only follow like a couple hundred people, and that's very much on purpose. But again, kind of on a random tangent here, but I think it's very, like you said, I think it's important to understand fat, especially if it's like, hey, I want to add a lot of muscle and I want to lose a lot of fat and I want to turn this into a lifestyle that's dramatically different than where I'm at currently. It will take a very long time, right? And it's not something we can just cram into a week or even a month or even a couple of months.
Yeah. And you said it perfectly. Like, do you want to completely reshape the way your body looks for life, or do you want to look good for just a day? And this is why the way that I put out what I do is I say, I want to permanently overhaul your mind and your body without these dumb diets and unsustainable workout programs, because a lot of people are stuck in that mentality. And that can be hard for me as a coach, like you mentioned, because I do promote that long game. I tell people straight up front, like, I've had people inquire with me and go elsewhere because I didn't promote this really fast, drastic result because they weren't in a place to actually keep pushing down the dieting route. And that's the thing that people need to see. Like, do you want to stay tired, fed up, stressed, stuck? Like, if you want to keep going down that route, then you're going to keep stuffing yourself up until you get sick and tired of all your bullshit, and then actually want someone to pull you out of your rack after you've already spent thousands or whatever doing what you're doing. But it is hard. It is a hard sell, but that's like, I was talking to a girl the other day and I resonated with her a lot. Like, she found it so hard up until now, where she finally reached out after following me for ages, that she wanted to finally get the kick up her bum to get back to tracking things, to get back to cooking again, and to get back to actually putting herself first, because she was just overwhelmed. She didn't want to track her food anymore. She was overwhelmed with even logging her food. And it's like, I've been there. Like, I was meticulously tracking my food to the gram. Yes, including my greens. Yes, including my lettuce and spinach, because I was competing. But I did that for friggin' 3 years of competing. And as soon as I finished my last comp at the Arnold's, which was the leanest I ever got, like, I wouldn't say I'm lean, but I'm small right now. I would say I'm lean if I actually had more muscle pump. But I'm pretty like, I would just say lean. I'm pretty lean right now. And this is at like 55, 56 kilos. I was like 48 on stage. Like, I got myself down to such a lean physique with the muscle pump. And that took a lot of discipline. That took a lot of focus. That took a lot of freaking hating life, hating the gym. Like, it was hard. And as soon as I finished that comp, let's not even talk about what I demolished after that comp. But from that day forward, I couldn't even bring myself to use a scale. I would break down over using a scale to weigh my food. Like, there comes a point where you just had enough. And as soon as, like, where do you go from that? Like, where do you go? And that restriction that you're putting on yourself, it may not seem like much now, but over time it does add up. And it's okay to feel like you're over it, because there are more ways to ease into it. Like, you don't have to start full throttle weighing everything, but that's where our flexible nutrition plan comes from. Just knowing what you can build a plan with. But this is really hammering home what we've been talking about this whole time. Like, you can't just expect to train your ass off, diet 24/7, and not take a break, not take a step back and realize the big picture and commit to it for life, versus for like some short-term thing, which I really liked what you said with your analogy. But how many, like, your clients come to you. When they come to you, they maybe see this, or they maybe don't see this. The ones that don't see it, they start to see it once they go through the process, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what, I guess maybe talk about the way that, just to like tie it all together, the way that when you actually start to focus on the right things and not just focus on numbers, figures, and like this end result, and start to focus on these, like how you feel, getting stronger, and the things that you should be focusing on, like the health stuff, then you actually start to realize, I actually like the way my body's looking. I actually like doing this. I'm actually progressing more. I'm looking better than I ever have before.
Oh yeah. And I always say, like, when a client is excited about their training, then that's kind of when we won, right? Because that's when it's gone from the point of, fuck, I have to go to the gym, to I'm excited to go to the gym. I'm looking forward to my training. I think that's like one of the biggest mindset shifts that we see. I don't know how many people are like, fuck yeah, I get to track my macros today. I'm so stoked for that. But I think that, and also this is why education is so important. I think when people can understand, okay, this is why what I'm fueling my body with is so important. And typically, like, the gym is the thing where it's like, I am so stoked to train. I'm off today, damn it. I'm so excited to train tomorrow. And then when you can see how what we're doing with your nutrition fuels that, and then we can kind of see how all this ties into the bigger picture of how your body has changed so far and the changes that you're capable of making. And also we can just kind of help people future cast, like, hey, this is what you're capable of accomplishing. This is what you can do, but it's just going to take time. Then and like to a greater extent, like getting people focused on, okay, who could I become? Like, if I continue this, where could I go? What could I do? And like almost just staying excited about still being able to enjoy where you're at. Like also like having that focus on like, okay, what's coming next? What am I going to accomplish next? And it's just fun to like have these goals that we're like one of the biggest things we focus on within our coaching service. Again, like it is important, I think, to appreciate where you're at. But also I think that at least most people that we work with are very goal driven and really take a ton of value in, which is also, I think, why like nutrition periodization kind of ties into this very naturally, where like, even if it's a maintenance phase where it's like, okay, look at how good you are getting at the skill of going out and making that work within your macros. And like, this is really what we're focusing on enjoying and like getting better at during this time. And like, maybe you are working in more free meals and things like that. And like, look at how good you're getting at all these lifestyle skills that are so important. Like, isn't that cool? It's like, oh yeah, hell yeah, that is cool. Right. And then we can go into like the building phase or whatever it may be. I definitely think with the topic of like always tracking your food, that's definitely an interesting one that I've gone back and forth on. Typically within like our clients, what I encourage people to do, again, like when we're in these things like the maintenance phase, the reverse diet, the building phase, we can like, hey, there's a lot more room for flexibility here. That's the beauty of this. We don't have to be quite as like precise and worry about like tracking all these things to the gram. And again, we can work in these things like free meals or untracked days, or things of that nature. But I also think like then when we go back into a diet, typically my approach is within not like, hey, we're going to push you to lose fat as fast as is humanly possible, but like, hey, it makes sense for us to be very precise within your dieting here so that we can get you losing like right at the desired rate, and you can be done dieting sooner rather than later. And then you can get back to this place where you have more flexibility again sooner rather than later. We don't have to like worry about all this shit so much. Again, kind of a random tangent, but yeah, that is my take on all that.
Actually, really, like you just showed, there are different ways to approach tracking. Like most of my clients, they have like a flexible meal plan, and it's like you need to be as precise as you can with this, knowing what, because it's flexible, it has like options and stuff, but you need to be as precise as you can with this if we're in a fat loss phase. But if we're not in a fat loss phase and we're just maintaining or just like focusing on performance and health, then yeah, you have a lot more flexibility. And the same goes for macros. Like the macros, you need to be as on point as possible if we're in this fat loss phase. But if you are resisting the whole idea that it's not just about having these lower calories, these lower macros, you need to actually stop after a while and bring yourself out, you're not going to even adhere to that. Like fat loss phases are taxing, not only physically, but mentally and hormonally and metabolically. And too long trying to chase that fat loss, you're not going to want to adhere. You're not going to put in the effort in the gym anymore. You're not going to put the effort into anything anymore. Your body, you will feel terrible. So that's why it's important, because then you'll actually be a lot more on point, realizing that this isn't forever. And as soon as you can accept that this fat loss phase isn't forever, you will be a lot more adherent. You will put in a lot more effort, and you will get yourself out of that fat loss phase sooner, because you'll probably even be more likely to adhere, because you'll start to actually freaking see results for once because you're adherent. And then as soon as you actually are like seeing those results, we can keep pushing that until it's time to come out of it. And then you re-establish this maintenance at a level where, okay, you can have a little bit more flexibility. You can go out and sub these foods in because it fits within your plan. You can go a little bit over one day, because then you can just either, depending how far you went over, you can like just deal with that, or you can take it out from another day. Like you have a lot more allowance within your macro target when you're not in that fat loss phase. And I say this in a way because we're females, we don't have a lot of leeway like males do, especially if you're small, especially if you're getting under 10,000 steps a day. You don't have a lot of leeway to go, because our bodies don't, they have like half the calories of males. Like you're probably on like 3,000 something, and people think that women would probably be around 1,600 for the majority of people that don't have coaches. But like I want to tie it up on this part, but when you get excited about what you want to do versus feeling like you have to do things, but also realizing, yeah, you do have to do things at first because you're doing something different. You need to force yourself into getting a new habit first. Like, you need to realize that it does get easier, and not one phase is permanent. And we all have times when we fall off. We all have times when we're not motivated, but realizing that it's for life is what keeps the results for life. So I'll let you tie it up with a little bit more just around the participation trophy and how we can actually win, and however short you can condense it down into.
Oh man. Yeah, I think that you put it nicely. When it comes to, again, these changes, you should be excited about it, but also I think that a lot of it is realizing you're also going to have to do a lot of shit that you don't want to do. Right. And even like, I see one of our biggest roles as coaches, it's not to tell people what they want to hear. It's not to like be your friend. First and foremost, is probably to push you to do the uncomfortable stuff that you haven't been doing, but what you need to be doing to get the results you want. Right. So I think it is very much a fine line of like, one, it does need to be sustainable and you do need to enjoy it, but also realize there are going to be some shitty parts, right? Like if we look at like flexible dieting, for example, I think one mistake people make is thinking that like, okay, if I have this good relationship with food, I'm going to be super flexible while I'm also trying to lose fat and like go hard on flexible dieting. Even coaches, like I've made this mistake in the past, like really like trying to teach my clients like everything about flexible dieting. Well, it's also like we're trying to lose fat quickly, right? And like, hey, that's probably just going to, like, that's why there needs, like the maintenance phases, the reverse diet phases, those are good times for us to really make sure that you're good with flexible dieting. But again, like if you're trying to diet too flexibly, and like what I mean by this, like you're going out like 3-4 times a week and also trying to lose fat during that time, you're probably just going to really struggle to lose fat, right? So again, it's definitely like a combination of, to sum it up, one, yes, it should be something that for the most part you enjoy. And it should be something that the lifestyle, not necessarily like, again, I think when people say like, you should be able to do it for the rest of your life, people think, okay, so my calorie deficit calories are like 1,600 calories. So I should be able to eat 1,600 calories for the rest of my life. Right. And it's like, no, that's not the case. But like, if you're like food selection, for example, that dramatically changes when you're dieting versus you're not dieting. If your training is like, okay, I'm dieting, so I'm training super hard, I'm pushing myself, and then you just like quit training as soon as you get the result, you're not going to be able to keep it. So the lifestyle should be something that you can see yourself doing forever. And that's my tangent on that.
I love that part because you said the rest of your life. So this is a perfect place to sum up everything and highlight exactly what the podcast is truly about. It's like, if you want to have something that lasts for life, when someone says that you need to be able to do it for your rest of your life, realize that no phase is permanent, but every phase needs 100% effort, and every phase needs to be within the seasons of life. Like, it's not just forever dieting. It's not just forever training your ass off or restricting calories. Like, you need to realize that you need to put the effort in the right places, and you need a smarter approach. Because if you're putting effort into the toilet, you're just gonna get it. You just, if the pipes bust, you're just gonna get shit all over your face. We don't want that. So put your effort in the right places, and let's aim for more than just a participation trophy. We want to win this game, and it's the game of life. So thank you for coming on again. I will put your links in the bio below again, and I'm actually going to run with that participation trophy now because I really liked it. So
thank you for having me. I enjoyed this.